All right. Hey, everyone. Thanks for coming to What's New in WinJS. My name is Paul Gus Marino, and I'm a program manager lead on the user interface platform team at Microsoft that works on all our UI platform technologies, including WinJS, XAML, and other things. I've been at Microsoft for 11 years working on user experience and developer platforms. And before that, I've been geeking out with computers and technology since I was 7 years old, programming in Microsoft Basic on an Apple II. And I'm really excited to get to tell you about what the team's been up to in the WinJS space in the past less than a year. So let's get to it. There we go. In short, we have WinJS 2.0, and that's what I'm going to be talking about today. I'm going to situate it and how it fits into building apps in HTML and JavaScript, give you a big picture of what's new in WinJS 2.0, spend most of the time deep diving through the new features available for all of you, and wrap up kind of with some next steps. Building Windows apps in HTML and JavaScript, where does WinJS fit into that? Well, as you know, Windows lets you build fully native, full-featured applications using HTML and JavaScript. And it does so by giving you access to 3 powerful libraries or families of APIs. At the middle there is HTML5. And by that I mean the full stack of technologies you use to create websites today. HTML, CSS, JavaScript. And we continue to invest a lot in this stack of technologies and bringing you new features. We brought you great touch support in Windows 8. In Windows 8.1, there's WebGL, showed in the keynote this morning. And that's HTML5. Next to it is WinRT, the Windows runtime. This is the set of APIs that gives you access to Windows and everything Windows has. Services, storage, access to devices like the new 3D printers they showed this morning, being able to connect to notifications, app-to-app communications, kind of everything that Windows has. And you have full access to that. And then finally, you have WinJS. And so WinJS is the Windows library for JavaScript, and it's the JavaScript library that gives you UI infrastructure, controls, and other pieces to make apps that look, feel, and work, like full-featured native Windows applications. And that's what today's focus is in this talk. Just under a year ago, we released WinJS 1.0 with Windows 8, but we're rapidly releasing WinJS 2 with Windows 8.1. I think this clicker died, by the way. That's what we're going to be talking about today. You can think about WinJS 2 as the version of WinJS for creating apps for Windows 8.1. And you can still create apps using WinJS 1 and targeting Windows 8, but all the cool new features and things I'm going to tell you about today are part of WinJS 2 for apps that target Windows 8.1 or later. A lot of great apps are already building on WinJS 2 today, as it turns out. Some new cool apps, the reading list app, the food and drink app you saw in the keynote with, where Julie waved her hand in front of it to change the recipes. Those are some of the cool new apps being built with WinJS 2 right now. A bunch of the kind of reworked apps, the mail app, the music app, the store app are already on WinJS 2 and much more. And so because of that, you can rest assured that we're kind of eating our own dog food, as we like to say at Microsoft, and that when you start building apps for Windows 8.1 with WinJS 2, that it's been vetted, polished, and is ready to use from day one. So why are all these apps excited about WinJS 2? What does WinJS 2 give them that gets all these people excited about and making their apps for it? Well, let's look at kind of the big picture of what's new. And I think there's really 4 key things to take away that we've done in WinJS 2. First is it's built for speed. Performance has been a top-of-mind concern for us in everything that we've done this release, and you'll immediately see it when you start using WinJS 2 to make apps. Whether you're using a super high-powered machine or the latest small form factor ARM device. We've updated existing features like the list view and binding template for big gains that users see in responsiveness and startup, and I'll show you a bunch of that. We've also built new features like the hub control and the repeater that I'll talk about that are designed from the ground up to let you build things that are really, really fast and performant. And we've also given you a lot more flexibility and control through the tools and the platform to tune and optimize your performance through features like the scheduler. So built for speed. Next, WinJS 2. Pardon me. supports a lot of more UX patterns. UX patterns that you've asked for. Old favorites like drag and drop, now supported, and a search box. As well as new emerging patterns like navigation bar and hub. Sorry, like choking up here. Quite literally. All right. But all the patterns that we've added support for, whether it's those old favorites like drag and drop or new emerging ones like the hub, you'll see we have highly polished implementations for you, work great for your users, support accessibility, support well readiness, and so forth. So that's the second thing to pay attention to in WinJS 2 that I'll talk about today. Third is beyond the standard patterns, we provided a lot greater flexibility for you to differentiate. Whether it's through improving the customizability of controls like the app bar, or through new primitive building blocks that we've added into the system, you'll see that you can forge ahead and create new UI patterns, new designs that the standard patterns haven't even caught up to yet, and it's much easier than ever before to do so. And that's been something that we've heard a lot of feedback from, and we wanted to make sure to get to you. And then finally, it's enhanced for end user efficiency. And so, I'm recovering from a cold here, so sorry about this. If your users are anything like me and a lot of the users we work with, they need to get work done. They need things that are efficient for multitasking. They want to use keyboard shortcuts. And we've done a bunch of work in WinJS to make it easy to make apps that work really efficiently for users that participate great with the new multitasking features in Windows 8.1 and keyboarding and so forth. So these are the 4 big things to take away. And now we're going to dive into a bunch of the new features. And I hope you'll see, as I go through those features, how these things kind of come through and come true, these 4 themes about built for speed, even more UX patterns with really great polished implementations, greater flexibility for you to differentiate, and really enhance for user efficiency. So let's dig into those new features. And I want to start just by saying WinJS 2 has everything that WinJS 1 had in it. So flyout, settings, flyout, date picker, time picker, all the controls and features, semantic zoom that you use today are there in WinJS 1, but there's more. First, we've enhanced a couple of the most used controls. List view and app bar. These are by far the 2 most used controls. We see everyone using these all over the place. We've done a lot of work on them that I'm excited to get to tell you about. Next, we have some new controls, hub, navigation bar, search box, and back button that kind of push things forward even further. We have some new infrastructure pieces that I think you'll find very interesting, the scheduler, dispose model, and the async debugging support that we've done. And we have these new UI primitive building blocks. We've done some enhancements to the binding template, and we have these new ones called repeater and item container. We're going to dig into all of these today. So I hope you guys had your coffee today, as I did, because there's going to be a whirlwind of stuff to talk about. So list view in WinJS 2.0, it's got native performance, and I'm going to show you what I mean by that. It's highly flexible layouts. We've improved the keyboarding, and now there's drag and drop and a really great implementation of it. Let's take a look at that. First, performance. List view is already very fast. These are some numbers in list view in WinJS 1. And from startup, inserting items, removing items, things people do all the time, you have really good performance today. But we said, gosh, we think we can do better. And so in WinJS 2, performance on these common scenarios users do all the time are improved 30% or more, just kind of for free. Just moving to WinJS 2, your users will immediately see these benefits. But these aren't superficial changes. It's not like we just made a couple tweaks and optimizations to get this. It's because we fundamentally re-architected the view and the layout code of the list view. So the list view now uses native CSS layouts to do all the laying out. So there isn't JavaScript code running anymore, absolute positioning, moving things around to do that. And so the performance benefits you get are much deeper than that. And let's look at that if we consider prefetching. As you may know, when you instantiate a list view, if you have a lot of items in it, we immediately rush to get the first screen of items all set up and interactive and ready for the user. But then in the background, we secretly go and load a few more pages of items so that if the user starts panning or scrolling, stuff is already ready for them. Well, because of the new work we've done where we've rewritten the layouts to use native CSS layouts, that time is cut in half. And while the user doesn't instantly see that, what the user does see is there's a lot less CPU cycles going on in the background. And that means more CPU cycles for your app to do other things. And so there's just this feeling of responsiveness that the app gets from improvements like this. And I think the best way to see that is to look at a real-world example. And so what I've got here is two side-by-side videos I'm going to show you. And we took the Windows 8 Mail app, okay? This is not the new fancy Windows 8.1 mail app. This is just the Windows 8 one without any of the new work they've done there or optimizations or other stuff. And we just kind of moved it over to WinJS 2. And this is an app that has very sophisticated data presentation needs. They've got to show you every mail message item has dates that have to be formatted the right way. They have content from inside the message that has to be truncated the right way, and they have to process it if there's emoticons in it. They have to have different templates and styling for read versus unread messages and attachments and flagged items and so forth. So some of the most complicated data presentation needs, and they have thousands of items to show in these mailboxes. So this is about as tough as it gets in terms of an app needing to show you data. And what I want you to see is in the side-by-side, we're going to have an automated user panning insanely fast. Okay? There's going to be panning like crazy in these two videos. And on the left, in the WinJS 1, you're going to see that the app is working really hard, but it's just at the brink of being able to serve up that data fast enough because it's such a fancy scenario. And within WinJS 2, you see, without even flinching, it'll just easily pan indefinitely with this insanely fast panning user. Let's go take a look at that. All right, so you see the insanely fast panning user, and with WinJS 1, the app is serving up the data really fast, but every now and then there's like some gray boxes where it just couldn't get the data served up fast enough. And with WinJS 2, it doesn't even flinch. And this is just moving the app over to WinJS 2. And this is the kind of benefit you'll see in your application. And this is on, thank you, yeah, this is a lot of work. And this is on a low power ARM device. So this isn't even, this isn't a fancy computer. This is the kind of perfect gain you'll see just from moving over. But there's much more than that. Because of the re-architecture and the fundamental work we did, you also have a lot more flexibility with your list view layouts now, which is something we've heard from a lot of folks. And so that means two things. First, we have a bunch of new built-in layouts people have asked for. How many people have wanted grid layouts that pan vertically? Well, now you have that. All right. People have asked for headers in list view in addition to grid view. And so you've got that. And we've seen a lot of people using self-spanning layout. And so we've actually pulled that out to be a whole layout type for list view to make it really easy for you to build those kinds of layouts. Kind of like the start screen where you have bigger and smaller kind of tiles all in a big kind of tile puzzle. But beyond the new built-in layouts, we've actually made it much easier for you to create your own custom layout with the iList Layout 2 interface. And I'd like to show you a demo of what you can do now. So let's switch over. All right. And I'm going to launch the Reading List app here. This is one of the new apps in Windows 8.1. Lets you collect links from IE and other apps and kind of store them up to go read them later. And here they're using a self-spanning layout. So you can see they have different sized items, but it's very easy for them to build this with the self-spanning layout that's built in. You'll also see that there's great keyboard support, so you can kind of keyboard around. You can also tab to the headers now and keyboard through the headers. So you can quickly jump from today to yesterday to last week to earlier this month to last month. So it's really quick and easy as a user to kind of use the view and get around because there's great keyboarding built in even with these fancy layouts. The app is ready for multitasking. So if you make the app smaller, let's say I want to create some room to launch another app, which I'm going to launch in a moment. They switched to list layout. But when they did that, they still were able to preserve their group headers because now there's group header support there, and they still have the same great keyboarding. You can see how nice it is. It jumps over the headers as you keyboard. You can tab into them, of course, if you want to and do that. But just a really nice implementation. So that's self-spanning and the group headers and list. Let's open the music app. Here they wanted to have horizontally panning grid, but it's a standard full grid layout. All the features of grid layout, you can swipe to select items and so forth. These are just the new built-in layouts, really great implementations, great support for them. But even kind of cooler than both of these, I think, is what you can do if you want to just be creative with the iList Layout 2 interface. One of our devs made this in very little time. The whole app is less than 200 lines of code, including all the CSS and everything. And it's just a very simple, it's a list view with a circle layout he implemented. We're not telling you to all start doing circle-based UIs or something, but it has all kind of the features of the list view. So you can add and remove items. You can right-click to select on items or swipe on them. You can tab and arrow around and things and hit the spacebar to select things. So it's a full functioning, complete list view. But it's very easy to write this totally custom layout for it because you're basing it all on the CSS primitives using the iList Layout 2 interface. So this is the kind of stuff you can do with WinJS 2 very easily. We're very excited about the new layout capabilities. But beyond the new layout capabilities and that performance, the other thing we wanted to do in list view is a lot of people have asked for drag and drop. And we've done a really great implementation of drag and drop for you. And I want to show you that today. And I'm going to use the Mail app to start. So here I have the Mail app. And now I can just swipe to drag an item, and it kind of unhinges. And then I can drop it, for example, in some other folder, like my inbox or something, if I wanted to move it. And I want you to pay attention to, while I did that, the performance. So that item totally stuck to my finger. No matter how much I move around, you can see how the item is sticking with my finger. That's because we didn't just implement drag and drop in JavaScript again. We plumbed it through the system all the way down to the dmanip layer of Windows, so that it's on an independent input thread, so that your UI thread isn't affected at all by that drag and drop. And that means that your app can be super responsive on the drop operation. That's why you can have panes coming and going and closing and opening as you pan things around, as you drag them around, without them being kind of chunky and slow, because it's all on independent threads, not affecting your UI thread, with the great drag and drop implementation we've done. But it's very full-featured as well. So I'm going to open up this SDK sample we wrote. You can do things like you can select multiple items and drag and rearrange them, and that's kind of built-in support for that. Of course, we care about keyboard users, and so you can do keyboard shortcuts to move things up and down, rearrange them. You can drag things out of the view. You can drag things into the view. You can drag things onto items in the view. Every permutation of thing you might want to do is supported in a really great way with the drag and drop support in list view. So go ahead and take advantage of that. So we showed you, yeah, good. Hope you like that. So we showed you the native performance that you get within list view and WinJS 2, the highly flexible layouts you can do, the improved keyboarding, the great drag and drop support, and it's really easy to use. It's the same API you've been using in WinJS 1. There are some subtle changes to how some CSS is interpreted. If you're trying to migrate some app, you can go to the migration talk later today to learn a little bit more about that. But it's the same API and interface. If you want to take advantage of the vertical panning or horizontal panning, you can do that easily. It's just an option on the layout. If you want to support drag and drop, that's easy too. You say add items draggable, and then you just write an event handler to listen to the item's drag start. And then I want you to pay attention here. You can just squirrel away whatever data you want into the event object. And then all the drop events are just the standard HTML5 drop events. So it's fully interoperable with anything you're doing with HTML5 drag and drop. You just kind of squirreled your data away into that object, and then you can handle it however you want on the drop. So really great. App bar is the other control that we have today that's used extensively across apps, and we made some key improvements to that as well. First is around scaling to window size, and I'll show you that. Keyboarding and making it really efficient for people like me, and I bet a lot of you who use our keyboard a lot. And what we've done with custom content, again, because we've seen from a lot of you, you want to put even more than just buttons and menus in there. So let's take a look at that. And I'm going to start also with the Mail app there. I'm going to swipe up the app to get the app bar. And I'm going to show you that right away I can start keyboarding around here. So I can just move my arrows left and right to keyboard. I can hit space to open a menu, escape to close it, space to open this flyout, escape to close it. It's just really efficient to kind of get around and use the app bar as a keyboard user. If I were to take the app and make it smaller, the label is dropped. And that's built in for you automatically in the control. So if you just use the app bar, if you run out of space to fit all the commands with their labels, the labels will just drop for you. And you can still get tooltips and so forth to show you the labels and other keyboard shortcuts. So it's just really great to use the app bar. It's kind of been enhanced to work well with these kind of multitasking scenarios and window resizing and that sort of stuff you might want to do. But beyond that, we know some people want to put custom content into the app bar, and so I wanted to show you that. So here in the SDK sample, I have the standard kind of buttons that people use, but I've also thrown a text box in here, an image, and a select tag, a combo box. But those also all participate in the keyboarding just fine. You can go and invoke them and use the controls. If I were to make the window smaller, such that the labels would drop, the labels still get dropped on the items. So you can put custom content at the same time as the buttons and have them all interoperate in a nice way, which you couldn't do before. And let's go look at how easy that is to do in the API. It's the standard app bar API you've been using today. You create an app bar, you put app bar commands in it that are buttons for most of your things. If you want to have one of those custom content sections, you put an app bar command and you set its type to content. And then you can put whatever content you want in there. If you go look at the docs in the SDK, you can see there's various other options you can set to control the keyboarding, like what do you want the first thing to get focused inside your custom content is when you arrow into it and so forth. But it's really kind of great support there in the app bar for that. All right, so those are two big used controls a lot today that we've enhanced quite a bit for you. Let's talk about some new controls now. The first of them is Hub. And this is an emerging pattern that we're starting to see more and more in apps. You saw it in Windows 8 in apps like News, Sports, Weather, and Finance. And now we're giving you a great control and a great implementation of that so that you can all have that same pattern too. The essence of it is it's just a set of sections you want to show in groups that the user can navigate around. And in the past, we've had the grouped grid view you could use for that, but that kind of imposed this contract where it's kind of an array of data that you're trying to present, whether these items. But a lot of cases we're seeing aren't items you want to present, it's just custom content you want to show. And the Hub control makes that really easy to do, and I think it's best shown in a demo. And so we're going to go show you that. And the team works really hard on these SDK samples for you, and so I like to use those because you also have access to all the source code of them up on MSDN. Here's just a basic kind of Hub. You can see you can put whatever kind of content you want in it. You can just put images or just arbitrary HTML. You can put other controls like a list view in there, a video tag. You can put form controls, whatever you kind of want to put in the sections. But it gives you a nice way to kind of present and lay out this content. And it gives you a lot of rich features around navigating around the content, which I'm going to show you. So one thing I want to say is you're not bound to within the little box. So you can do full bleed images, for example, something we've seen a lot of people want to do in certain sections. You nicely pan around the whole thing. If you want, just like in the list view, you can tab to the headers and arrow key around. I'll make the window smaller so you can kind of appreciate that more. Sometimes you have sections that you want to drill into to get more data. So this list view, they didn't show all the content here. And so you can say, hey, I want my header to be interactive. And we'll show a little chevron on it, make it a link. So you can click in and kind of get that more content and then go back out. So it's kind of built in for you in a nice way. The other thing it does is it's really optimized for performance. So we're smart about delay loading off-screen sections. So as soon as the on-screen sections are ready, we'll show them to you right away. And then we'll load the other ones after that. It's easy to hook up to a semantic zoom. So sometimes if you have a lot of stuff in a hub, it's a pain to pan around. And so a user can just zoom out and then zoom right into the section with a semantic zoom control. And we've already hooked up the hub with all the interfaces for that. So it's just a few lines of code for you to do that yourself. If you want to go vertical, you can do that. Sometimes people, when they have a small window, again, with these multitasking scenarios, want to go vertical. And that's kind of built in, but you still have the interactive headers. You still have the support for the semantic zoom and so forth. So it's a really great control. And it's being used by a bunch of key apps, including the Windows Store. And so you can see the new store design that Antoine showed you at the keynote today takes advantage of and is designed for the hub pattern using the WinJS 2.0 hub control. And so they have a first section that has this kind of flip view control in it. They have other sections that are kind of laid out in different ways. If you go and you look at some specific app, I'll pop up this one here. You can see that different sections of the app content are presented in different ways. They have the interactive headers you can click into and so forth to see all the ratings and reviews, while they only showed some on that other screen. So the hub control it's right there for you in WinJS and easy to use. Let's look at how you use it. You just create a WinJS UI hub, and then you put one or more hub sections inside it. And the hub sections have various options you can configure to control the title, if it's shown or not shown, if it's interactive, and so forth. And then you can put arbitrary content inside your sections. And you get kind of that whole kind of experience that I was showing you. So that's the hub control. The second big emerging UI concept we've seen in the past 7 or 8 months has been the navigation bar. This is also one that we've seen a lot in these content type of applications. News, weather, sports, finance, a lot of kind of magazine apps. And they just want a way to navigate around to different parts of the app. And so this common patterns emerged of a bar that you swipe from the top, kind of like the app bar, that shows you kind of key places to navigate to, and you can click on them and navigate around very easily. What you kind of might have thought of in Win32 UI is like your folder tree, or a lot of web pages do with kind of bars that have those kind of pop-up floaty hover menu things. So let's look at the navigation bar. And I'm going to show you that first in the calendar app. So you want to be able to switch from the different kind of main pages in the calendar, the month view, the day view, the week view. So here that is hooked up there, day, week, month, and so forth. You just kind of swipe down. It's all the same app bar, keyboard shortcuts and so forth. So Win key Z will give you that too, and so forth. Right click in the background will give you that as well. And it's just very easy to kind of do that navigation. But it's much fancier than that. If you want, you can have multiple levels of these things. So here in the App Store, they have not just that top level of buttons, but they have quick links to different categories like games and so forth. And the API makes that really easy for you to do. I'm going to pop up the SDK sample here and show you a few other things you can do. If you have a bunch of data, we actually do a great job paginating the data into little pages. You can flip through them, and you can do that with mouse. You can do that with touch. It even works with keyboard. It's just a nice experience. Here, I'll make this window even smaller so you can see that even more. All right, so that's kind of built into the control, so it kind of scales easily to lots of content. The other thing you can do is you can put arbitrary content in there. So here, I'm going to put a search box in the navbar control, because maybe you want to use the new search box control, but you don't want it on screen all the time, so you can put it in the navbar, and that's a supported thing, and still works along with everything else. You can even do split buttons. Some people have wanted to do that, so you can have kind of split buttons with more sublinks. So it's a really great, very flexible control, gives you a lot of power, and we're really excited to offer that to you in the platform now. You create a nav bar. That's the top level bar itself. You can create a navbar container underneath that. That's the little section that has the commands in it that you can kind of flip through. And then you just create a navbar command for every single command you want. You can adorn them with icons and labels and so forth. And they automatically hook up to the WinJS navigation model. So if you're using the WinJS navigation model to do your navigation of pages as a single page app, this kind of fits in naturally with that and just automatically hooks into that nav stack and so forth. So it's kind of great and goes hand in hand with that and gives you really a pretty complete solution for doing navigation around a sophisticated, bigger app with more and more screens in it. So I hope you take advantage of the navigation bar. You can add multiple of these and so forth. All right, search box. You saw the demo in the keynote this morning about the great new system search in Windows 8.1. Something we've seen a lot of apps want to do is have great search inside their own apps. And so we've built a modern search box control for you and put it in WinJS. It's a very full-featured control. It supports all the cool new touch input type of stuff that Julie showed this morning. It has auto-completing suggestions. It has really impressive integration with IMEs if you do input in Japanese or other EA languages. There's a whole talk on it tomorrow that'll dig into a lot more of the cool stuff you can do with it. I just wanted to give you a quick demo of it, and I'm going to do that actually in the News app, which is one of the apps using it. So if you tap into the box, you can start typing, and you can see the app can provide links. The suggestions it can provide can have images or not have images. It can be kind of sorted. If you just kind of put focus into it, it automatically remembers the history of the last searches I did. So it's very easy to kind of get a lot of full-featured capabilities from the search box just using it. And there's a lot of customization you can do of it as well to control those behaviors if you want to. It's just a search box control. Two of the important events you'll want to know about in handling it is the suggestions requested event and the query submitted event. Suggestions requested is how you can give it the suggestions you want to show up in that list. And you can then write code that looks at your local store of data or communicates with open search protocols or however you're getting those suggestions and do that. And then handle query being submitted as well. And finally, we added a back button control. A lot of people have back buttons in their apps, and we found it's just kind of a hassle for people to implement them correctly because there's a lot of weird things like mice have those weird buttons on the side that go back, and there's keyboard shortcuts and various things to them. And so we said, let's just give people a good back button control that they can use, and people appreciated that. We were able to remove a bunch of code from the template. I'll just give you a quick demo of the back button because I like to do little demos of things. So here's the VS Hub template, and Hub app, and I can go and I can click into the section, and then I can hit back, restores my position. It works with keyboard shortcuts, so if I hit Alt left key, that'll go back to as well. So it kind of just gives you a great little back button experience by default. And again, like the nav bar, it plugs into the WinJS navigation model, so just putting it in there, it'll automatically hook up to the nav stack for you. So really easy to use. So now let's transition away from UI controls and talk about some of the infrastructure pieces that we've added. And I want to start that with the scheduler. If you're building a modern application, you necessarily have to have a lot of asynchronous tasks going on. You're going to have things you're fetching off the network, off of disk, processing you're going to be doing, and you don't want to block the UI thread. And so you're going to have asynchronous tasks going on. But today, it's difficult to kind of manage all of those, especially because there's lots of different parts of the system spawning these asynchronous tasks. App code, code in WinJS, system code in response to kind of things that have gone on in the system. Maybe you have multiple different libraries or components within your own app code. And in the end, it's hard to really control the final experience the end user sees in a predictable, reliable way. Because when these different tasks might all complete and come together, might result in a slightly different order of how things appear on screen or how things show up for the user. And for example, maybe you wanted that task there that is in green to get completed before that task there that's in orange. And there's no really good way to do that today. Well, WinJS 2.0 provides a solution with the scheduler. And it couldn't be easier to use. Whenever you want to schedule some work to do, in the past you might have used set immediate or set timeout to do so, or you might have had other ways that kind of indirectly you kind of created tasks that did work, like XHR. Well, you just call the schedule function in the scheduler with a priority level, and then the scheduler will take care of kind of putting those tasks in with a certain priority level and making sure that things are always processed in priority order. So you can guarantee that some tasks will happen before other tasks when you have all these asynchronous tasks going on. Just to give you a little example of how you might want to use that, I'll go back to the mail example. They want the reading pane, perhaps, to get rendered kind of right away. They want it to show up so someone can start reading their email before the list view goes and prefetches all those future pages of stuff like I was telling you about. Well, with the scheduler, it's easy to do that because we've hooked up all the code in WinJS to use the scheduler, so everything is already booked at a certain priority. So you just book your work at other priorities, and it'll kind of seamlessly get merged in with that work. And so now you're in total control of what order, what work is happening in your app. It's really powerful. It's really exciting. And and it works in concert with everything we have in WinJS. So I urge you to do that. Again, it's really easy. Where you might have been doing set immediate in the past, just call the scheduler with priority normal, or priority high, or priority idle. There's even more priorities. If you go to a talk tomorrow called Fast and Fluid Apps in HTML and JavaScript that Paul Gilday is giving, you can learn even more about kind of all the options available for you there and some of the other cool things the scheduler lets you do. So that's one big piece of infrastructure we've added that will really help you a bit. The next one is the dispose model, and this is about memory management. If you're building an app today, you necessarily kind of are, creating lots of objects and things, and you run into problems sometimes where you have leaks in your apps. And let me kind of talk about that and how the dispose model helps. So let's say you're writing an app and you have some objects that you want to have a longer lifetime on them. For example, maybe you have an app that connects to some user data, a service, and you have the user account information. And then maybe you have some objects you want to have a shorter lifetime, like there's a control on one page, and then once the user goes away from that page, you want to kind of get rid of that. Well, typically the way in JavaScript you would do it is you remove your reference to the short-lived object, and then when the garbage collector runs, it'll clean up that memory, and your memory's freed up. But sometimes what happens is these short-lived objects can be quite clever. Maybe they're controls that you've passed data to, and they've hooked themselves up and formed other kind of connections behind the scenes, unbeknownst to you, to other objects. And so then, even if you removed your reference to the object, when the garbage collector runs, it can't clean it up because it still has references existing in the system to it. And so the dispose model in WinJS 2 solves that problem for you in a very simple way. And we've implemented this across everything in WinJS. You just call dispose on the object, and that tells it, hey, you better clean up all the little references and things that you created that kind of link you into a web with other things. Once you've called dispose on something, you should assume it's kind of non-operative and shouldn't be used anymore. So then when you remove your reference to it, the garbage collector can do its job and actually get rid of the object. All right? And to show you another scenario, kind of how this kind of comes together in a bigger picture, let's look at a kind of more complicated app, something you might build starting with the VS templates. Maybe you have some data, like it's a music collection. It's a music app, and it's the music collection of the user. And they navigate to some page. Whoops. They navigate to some page in the app, maybe showing their jazz music. And that page has a list view on it, and that list view binds itself to the music collection. And you can see the problem that's going to happen here. But with dispose, you just call dispose on the page. Part of the dispose contract is that any object that participates in it is responsible for disposing all the things that it itself had spawned. So it kind of unravels this whole kind of set of things that it created, and then when you remove your reference, you can get garbage collected. And in fact, we've updated the VS templates to do this automatically. So if you're using all the VS templates as your starting point for your apps, we automatically have dispose hooked up there, and you kind of start getting this benefit right away on page navigates. So using it again, just call dispose. All the WinJS controls implemented. It's hooked up in the VS templates. If you write your own controls, we really encourage people as they're building their apps to architect them in a sensible way. If you build other UI controls that go along with the standard WinJS ones, we encourage you to implement dispose on them and participate in that system to have a really sensible kind of memory management solution. All right. Yeah, you guys like that? All right, good. It's simple, but it works. So I hope you guys will like this next one too then. Asynchronous debugging. So as we've been talking about, when you're writing a modern, sophisticated application, you necessarily have tons of tasks that are running asynchronously, that have been spawned forth. And typically there's actually some causality chain that cause these tasks to get invoked, but it's not always apparent kind of what that was. And specifically, when you break into the debugger, you set a breakpoint or you somehow break into the debugger, it'll show you the stack, at that point there within that task, but you have no sense of context. You have no idea, how did I get here? What was the set of causality events that caused me to get here? Well, with asynchronous debugging, there's a feature kind of implemented across tools and the platform in Windows 8.1 and with WinJS 2. It's easy to do that. And so you'll be able to see when you break into the debugger, not just the stack trace of that current task, but a lot of important causality information and stack traces of tasks that kind of led to this task being caused. This is kind of like Star Trek time warp time here. Let's go take a look at a demo of that. Let's see here. All right, here we go. So this is a simple app I made. It just has a function called do some work that causes my work to be called. Okay, I just use a set immediate here to be simple about it, and I put a breakpoint inside my work function. Now, traditionally, when I'm going to run this app, when my work got broken into the debugger, I have no way of knowing who caused my work to be called. But now, take a look with the new stack kind of trace stuff, what you can see there. So traditionally, you would have just seen this line here. It would have been great. I know I broke in there, but how did I get here? With the async debugging support, you can now see, some async operation happened. What was being done right before that? Oh, do some work was called. So you can now kind of trace back and figure out, yeah, really cool, right? And we've hooked this up throughout WinJS. So promises, the scheduler I mentioned, everything is hooked into async debugging. So it's going to be a lot easier for you to debug your rich, powerful, awesome, apps and make them great. So we're very excited about that feature. All right. So I talked about improved controls, and I talked about new controls, and I talked about infrastructure improvements, and now I want to talk about building blocks that give you kind of the flexibility and power to make your own UIs. And one of the core ones in WinJS today is binding templates, and we've improved them for WinJS 2. As you know, a binding template is kind of like a Mad Lib. It lets you create a little bit of HTML and bind various properties of a JavaScript object to that HTML, so you can kind of stamp out HTML based on JavaScript objects. But while this is very powerful and flexible and awesome, it's actually pretty intensive to do all this kind of binding work today, because we have to do lots of DOM manipulations, as we're kind of binding each of those properties and adjusting all this HTML, and that can take some time and affect your performance. Well, as luck would have it, one of the developers on our team used to work on compilers, and he saw this and he said, hey, you know what? I bet we can compile this. And so we did. And WinJS 2 kind of pre-compiles and pre-processes the templates so that it's kind of done as a single big HTML DOM operation as opposed to tons of little ones. And you get staggeringly better performance. And so this is with the same template I just showed you here. Your mileage may vary. Like the more complicated your template is, the more perf gain you get from this. With this simple template here, if I had 100 of them, I could, on a surface, in under 90 milliseconds, spit them all out. But with WinJS 2, I can do that in under 40 milliseconds, so 58% faster. So you can really take advantage of binding templates and get just much better performance with them. There are also some debugging improvements associated with that. Again, if you go to the perf talk tomorrow, they're going to dig into this one quite a bit more. So binding templates are great, but something we hear from a lot of people is, hey, I don't want to just bind one object to some UI. I would like to bind a whole array of objects to some UI in an arbitrary way. Welcome the repeater. The repeater control lets you take a binding list, bind it to some UI. If the binding list gets updated, the UI gets updated. Really simple. It's a very low policy control. We found a lot of people were sort of abusing the list view control because it's the only thing that let you bind to an array. And so they're kind of creating weird UIs that really weren't meant to be lists using list view. And so we think this is a great solution for that. It's a very low policy control. The list view has selection and keyboarding and accessibility and animations and all these things built into it. And by all means, if you want a list view experience, you should use the list view control for that. But if you're doing some other UI, a graph, for example, that's not supposed to be a list view, doesn't have those list view features, Repeater is a great way to build that UI. It gives you a lot of flexibility as a primitive building block. And I'd like to do a demo of it for you. All right, so the first thing I'm going to show you is because we're just binding arbitrary HTML UI, you can bind to any type of element that you have in HTML. So you can bind to a select tag. You can bind to unordered lists. You can bind to tables, heaven forbid. So it's kind of very flexible in that regard. Here I'm going to show that as you add and remove items from your binding list, the UI updates right away. Because it's just arbitrary HTML UI, you can apply CSS changes and dynamically change things about it, independently of changing the data. You might have noticed that when I added and removed items, there's no animation. That's like a feature of list view that has built-in animations, but the repeater doesn't automatically do that, but you can do that if you want. And so here we just use CSS transitions to show how you can easily have animations on operations like that if you want to do that. So it's just a very, very flexible control. You can even nest these things. So create hierarchical presentations of data. It's a very, very flexible primitive building block to bind lists of data to arbitrary HTML UI. And we hope you like it. Oh, you do? OK. You use it just like binding template for the most part. You can use it inline. So here I've done an inline version. I just created a binding list, and then I just connected it to my repeater control. But if you want to, you can also create a separate binding template and reference it from the repeater, so you don't have to do it inline. You can do it either way. There's a lot of kind of rich power there. Check out the docs and the SDK sample on that. And then the final UI building block I wanted to talk to you about today is the item container. And one of the things we saw with the list view, this is kind of more of our deconstructing the list view, is that people really like the behavior we have where you can select items or press on them and they have that press animation or drag and drop them now. But they said, hey, gosh, we wish we could have that outside of a list view. Maybe we have a map. Maybe we have a calendar. We would like to have those kind of little interactive selectable items, but not in a list view context, in some other context. And the item container lets you do that. And let's take a look at it. It's kind of like the items inside a list view kind of pulled out. And so you can do all the things you expect, like you can swipe to select. You can hover, get hover states, and press, and right-click to select. You can tab and hit the spacebar to toggle selection. The new drag and drop that I showed you is supported by it. So item container kind of extracts out the item part of a list view and makes it a control you can just kind of freely use as a primitive building block. It's simple to use. And the thing I want to point out about the API of it is it's just an item container control, but we actually map to and use the same code as in the list view. So all the CSS styling and all the types of things you might do to style a list view item apply equally. And the same kinds of APIs, swipe behavior, tap behavior, et cetera, that you might use in a list view item, you can use in the item container. So it families very well with the list view if you're familiar with using that. All right. So that was kind of an overview of kind of what we've done in WinJS 2, kind of a whirlwind. And I just want to kind of recap that and tell you about next steps. So we talked about a lot today. We talked about really improved controls, the list view with that just amazingly faster native performance, and that flexibility of layouts and those new capabilities like drag and drop. We talked about the app bar and how it scales and works with keyboard and multitasking and the customization. We talked about these new emerging patterns, the hub and the navigation bar and the controls that support them in a really great way for you, really polished implementations, and the search box and the back button. We talked about these infrastructure pieces that really let you build scalable applications and really make it possible for you to handle kind of all the tasks and memory management things that you want to have going on with the scheduler and the dispose model and the async debugging. And we talked about these primitive building blocks, the binding template, the repeater, and the item container that kind of let you do more custom UIs more easily. I hope you saw that these 4 kind of things we tried to do in this update ring through, how it's built for speed, how there are even more UX patterns, how there's greater flexibility to differentiate, and how it's enhanced for end user efficiency. And it's available today. So I know we released WinJS 1.0 less than a year ago, but the 2.0 preview is available for you today. If you go and install VS and start making a Windows 8.1 app, it's kind of the default thing that's linked to, and you can start using it. You can also migrate an existing Windows 8 app to be a Windows 8.1 app to start using WinJS 2. If you stick around here for the migration talk, you can learn about how to do that. There will eventually be a WinJS 2.0 final version, not the preview version. And so you'll need to make sure if you start building an app today that you eventually link to the final version before you upload your app to the store, because you don't want to be linking to like our pre-release code. But yeah, you can get started with it today, tonight. Some other talks you may want to pay attention to, in addition to this one here. If you missed earlier today, there was the Advancing Web Development talk that Israel gave. That covers a lot of the improvements in the HTML5 space, so you may want to catch that video if you missed it. And right after this talk, there's upgrading Windows 8 apps to 8.1, and that'll be a great talk if you're trying to do that migration. Tomorrow, if this is your first time you've ever kind of looked at WinJS or HTML apps, you might want to check out the talk. Polita and Ryan built a really awesome app from scratch using HTML and JavaScript and WinJS 2. I'm giving a talk tomorrow. If you're interested in the hub, the navigation bar, and a lot of the other UI patterns, I'm giving a talk tomorrow with Monita Kushner on designing and building user interfaces for Windows. It talks more about kind of the design aspects of that and how you actually think about designing the UI. Also, beautiful apps any size, on any screen. We'll talk more about, hey, different window sizes. How do you want to rearrange your UI or handle that? And you can see how all the work in WinJS 2 supports that, makes that easy for you to do. You can also dig into the search box control and learn a lot of the cool stuff that's available there. And that's the design and build a great search experience in your app. And then finally, Friday. Actually, Paul, do I have that right? Is that Friday or Thursday? You're fast and fluid. Thursday. So move that first Friday one up to Thursday. Is the create fast and fluid interfaces with HTML and JavaScript talk. And that'll dig deeper into some of the features I talked about today and really show you end-to-end how scenarios like startup and stuff you can really optimize using these features. And then finally on Friday, the Mail team is going to be here, Jeremy Epling, to tell you about how they built the new Mail app and how they're using WinJS 2 and other features of the system to build a great app. So you might want to check that out. Thanks so much for coming to my talk. And I'm going to hang out. If people have questions or anything, please submit session feedback. And thanks so much for coming and for all your work.